the Time Lord.
If you want aliens, you've got them.
Whose biggest problem is just staying alive. Doctor Who. Saturday from 6 on BBC One.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another brand new video where we're continuing with the Series 1 look back videos. I don't want to call them reviews because they're not really meant to be straight reviews in the same way as normal, but my videos looking at each episode of Series 1 15 years to the day after they aired. And of course this week we're looking at episode 5 of Series 1. It's World War III. Well, it's not, even though it feels like it maybe sometimes at the moment given everything that's going on in the world. But yes, this is episode 5, the second part of the two-part Slitheen story from the earlier part of Series 1. What I feel is kind of the completion of a sort of mini arc for the first 5 episodes of the series where we kind of get introduced to the Doctor and Rose and Mickey and Jackie and their whole relationship. Then Rose has her past and future adventures, and then we kind of get brought back to Earth and see the kind of the reactions to that happening and what the problems that's caused until we finally get to the end of this episode. She travels off properly with him again, and it feels like we're set off on the next set of adventures from here to go on now, I think. So what is there to say about this episode? I think this episode is a little bit more serious maybe than the first part. They kind of have significantly toned down the whole farting alien Slitheen type thing that they had going on in the first part, and so they feel a little bit more like, I think, a presence and a threat in this story than what was shown in the first part, which I think was important and good to just kind of establish that so you can actually buy into it and be really convinced by them in this story and feel like they are a genuine threat to the Doctor and Rose and the human race ultimately. And they're quite interesting idea really, that their whole plan is basically to take over the government, fake the fact that there's some massive spaceships up in the sky that they need to send nukes at, and then use the nukes to send out and back into Earth, set off a nuclear war and destroy the planet, and then sell on the rest of it for profit. It's actually quite a good and quite interesting idea that I quite like. It's something a little bit different to your just standard, there's an alien invasion, oh, they want to take over the Earth because they do, again, why not? So it was just nice to, although it is kind of alien invasion based, it still is just a little bit of a twist on that. I think it works really well in just mixing things up a little bit. And watching this story back again, what just struck me was how kind of exciting it is, I think, more than anything else. Just the sort of the second half of this story where the Doctor and Rose and Harriet Jones are stuck in the Cabinet Office, and Mickey's in control of sending missiles in to go and blow up Downing Street, and it just felt so fantastically exciting in that moment. You felt a real kind of danger to it, I think. You weren't 100% convinced that everybody was going to get out of it completely fine, even though, obviously, they were always going to. But I think it just added that level of threat that it really, really needed, and just the excitement with the music as well. I thought the music was really, really good in this story. It's really an effective score by Murray Gold. The theme for the Slitheen is so iconic as well, I think, more than anything else. But just the action music as the missiles being shot across the UK to be able to go and hit Downing Street, which was, to be fair, the CGI was fairly well realised in that. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's 2005, we've got to give them a little bit of slack for that. I do think this story had some great moments with the main characters, with the Doctor and Rose and Jackie in particular as well, and her kind of trying to get the Doctor to say that whether it's dangerous or not, or whether she's going to be, where Rose is going to be safe or not, and then ultimately sort of admitting no, she's not going to be safe and she might die in this. And that's sort of the conflict there between them, in that Rose loves this lifestyle, but the Doctor knows this is also potentially deadly, and Jackie is realising that it's a bit deadly as well, and it's just such a fascinating kind of dynamic to explore, I think, at this point, when they've actually got them all together in the same episode again, having conversations, even if not in person. I think it works really, really well, and just continues to develop that relationship and that dynamic between the Doctor and Rose in the early episodes of this series. So, having done a little bit of research, I'm more aware of the political satire and sort of allegory of this story to do with the Iraq crisis and sending sort of the Iraq, I think it was a missile strike or something in Iraq back in 2003, I believe. Unfortunately, I was literally too young to obviously know anything about that, so wouldn't have known about it at the time, and even since then it's just not really an area I've ever looked at in history or lessons or anything like that, so I was never particularly aware of it. But I know the kind of play on the idea of massive weapons of destruction that can be launched in 45 seconds, with the equivalent was, I think it was massive weapons of destruction that could be launched in 45 minutes, was the tagline or something, I think, with what supposedly Iraq were going to do. So yeah, there was just these little elements of political satire in there, which I'd never really known much about up until now because I hadn't really researched it, so I don't feel like it was a particularly big thing that had a major impact on the story. It's just one of those that kind of, when you look at it in the context of the time, it can have that aspect to it, but it's not massively important to the story and really adds or takes anything away, quite frankly. This was also the last Doctor Who episode to be aired by the infamous Keith Boak, who supposedly was kind of the main reason why Christopher Eccleston did not do another series of Doctor Who after this, because he was supposedly rumoured treating the extras and some of the actors and people terribly during the filming process, which basically made Chris really angry straight away as soon as they started production, because Keith worked on the first production block of Rose, Aliens of London and World War III. And apparently there were major problems around that. I think that supposedly Keith got the tone wrong in what they wanted to do with the show, hence why particularly the previous episode is so kind of comedic and light-hearted in tone compared to some other episodes. Even look at Dalek that's coming up next, or The Unquiet Dead that was the week before. There's such a different tone to this episode and these set of episodes. So I think that, yeah, it's notable that this was one of the story that he directed and he was involved with, and that he's quite a significant figure in the show, given that, not explicitly stated, but it certainly seems like he was the one who was a major part of the reason that Chris completely fell out with the show straight away and it never got to another series of it. Of course, we have the character of Harriet Jones in this story, who ultimately becomes the Prime Minister of Great Britain, supposedly, and the mention of the fact that she went through 3 successive terms as Prime Minister kind of presents some major issues in the timeline of the show, given that we see in the Christmas Invasion that she's deposed, basically, by the next Doctor. Presumably that's at the end of this supposed 3 terms of being it, which in theory in the UK would be between 11 and 15 years, which, given the story set in 2006, puts us to 2020 or 2021, which really makes no sense whatsoever in comparison to any other episode of New Who. So it's probably just best that we don't really focus and think about that too much, because it causes a lot of problems. As much as I love her character, and it was great she's in this episode and then becomes the Prime Minister in Christmas Invasion, and then obviously gets deposed and we see her once more in The Stolen Earth. But yeah, trying to think too much about the timeline, like many things in Doctor Who, just think unit dating, it's just not worth it because you're never going to find an answer. So yes, overall, this is I think a stronger episode than the first part of this 2-part story. I think it's a story that, for example, uses Mickey a lot better than we've seen up until any point in this series, whether he was just a sort of pathetic, wimpy person in the first episode, really. By this point, he's very much the guy controlling the computer that's trying to save the world, essentially. He's heavily involved with that. He comes and he's willing to smash up a Slitheen with a baseball bat if he needs to, and all that. He's sort of really developed in bravery and courage by this point, which I think is good to see that initial bit of character development, which is then, of course, explored into Series 2 as well, which is really nice to see. And yeah, it just is an overall, I think, it's not a classic, but I don't think it's as bad as some people want to complain. I think particularly the second part has the excitement elements and the real tension behind it and the real great character moments behind it to really create what is actually quite a strong story. But apart from that, guys, as always, hit that like button, that subscribe button if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for a brand new one. Goodbye!